From the moment I received the news about Samuel's passing, it hadn't even been a full week when suddenly, 7 of his distant relatives showed up unannounced at our doorstep, boldly claiming the house was now theirs. Despite their serious demeanor, I couldn't help but chuckle at the absurdity of their claim. They looked at me with suspicion, demanding an explanation for my laughter. Calmly, I confronted them. "You might not be aware, but Samuel has already left the house to me," I disclosed, revealing the trust he had placed in me. The color drained from their faces as they processed the news. "My name is Grace, a 49-year-old kitchen worker at a bustling French restaurant in town, known for its great value and popularity. Recently, I've been sticking to my regular shifts, refraining from overtime. My husband, Samuel, who had been battling severe cancer, needed my care more than ever. Samuel and I had shared 28 years of marriage, and this was the first time he faced such a grave illness. The cancer, discovered during a routine health check, had aggressively spread. With each passing day, his strength waned significantly. Despite the challenges, Samuel continued to work from home as an interior coordinator, managing his tasks with just his computer. This arrangement allowed me to focus fully on work during the day since Samuel took care of most household chores. However, since his illness escalated, I adjusted my work hours to provide him the care he deserved. I began my shifts early and left as the restaurant got busier. My colleagues and manager were incredibly supportive, adjusting my schedule to lessen my burden without impacting our finances significantly. They even encouraged me to maintain a cheerful disposition for Samuel's sake, assuring me that they would handle everything at work. Grateful for such understanding coworkers, I always made it a point to thank them and express my appreciation for their flexibility and support. One day, as I signed out early and rushed to the hospital, a nurse greeted me warmly. "Mrs. Grace, the doctor just arrived and is discussing with your husband," she informed me. Hurrying to his room, I found Samuel with the doctor, his face showing the toll of his illness, but his spirit still fighting. Your wife is here," Samuel remarked with a faint smile as I entered. The doctor was about to share more about Samuel's condition when he suddenly stopped, an ominous pause filling the room. Both the doctor's and my senses tingled with a foreboding feeling about what was to come. As we sat together in the quiet hospital room, Samuel, looking pensively out the window, broke the silence. "Grace, how long has it been since we said bye-do?" he asked, his voice filled with a mix of nostalgia and sadness. I hesitated before answering. 28 years, Samuel. 28 years, he echoed with a wistful smile. "It feels like a lifetime, and yet just a blink." His words, tinged with resignation, made me anxious. "Don't talk like that," I implored, hoping to steer the conversation away from his somber thoughts. "We still have time." Samuel shook his head gently, his gaze avoiding mine. "Just give me 5 more months, Grace. Maybe even less. I know my own body better than anyone else," he said, a weak smile playing on his lips. Hearing him so resigned to his fate, tears began to spill from my eyes. Seeing my distress, he reached out to wipe my tears, his own eyes moistening. "I promised I'd never make you sad," he said, his voice breaking. Despite his efforts to console me, my tears flowed even more freely. "I'll have to apologize to your parents when I see them next," he added, half-jokingly trying to lighten the mood. I couldn't contain my emotions. "Don't talk like that. As if everything is already decided. We still have options, medical advancements, other hospitals to consult," I insisted, desperate to find a glimmer of hope. But Samuel gently squeezed my hand, signaling his peace with the situation. "I'm going to leave soon, Grace. I've accepted that. But before I do, I want to live as fully as I can. Let's cherish every moment we have left," he said firmly. Then, his tone lightening, he began to outline his wishes for the days ahead. "I don't want to spend my remaining time here in the hospital. Let's go home, and Grace, can you take some time off work? There's a trip we always talked about taking. I want to make that happen." His resolve and the sadness of the situation hit me hard, pulling me back to a harsh reality. After a moment, I composed myself enough to discuss his wishes with his doctor, who agreed to arrange his discharge. The next day, after additional safety checks, Samuel was ready to leave the hospital. On his final days at the hospital, I stayed by his side as much as possible. During one of these moments, Samuel's mother, his brother Ryan, and Ryan's wife Kayla came to visit. Ryan, 54 and a bit of a drifter in his construction job, greeted us warmly, while Kayla, much younger and strikingly beautiful, offered a bright smile. The room was filled with quiet conversations, the air mixed with feelings of sadness and love. As we talked, the bonds of family felt both comforting and poignant, reminding us of the strength we could draw from one another during such tough times. Kayla's stern expression and sharp tone of voice set her apart, her domineering presence distinctly different from how she interacted with others, and it always struck me as odd. At 75, Samuel's mother maintained a youthful vigor, but her greed was unmistakable, and she blatantly favored Ryan, her other son, over Samuel. This favoritism always made me feel uneasy. I've never been fond of Samuel's family. Ryan often made inappropriate jokes, and Kayla, from the very first meeting, treated me like a rival, never missing an opportunity to throw a cutting remark my way. The matriarch of the family, Samuel's mother, treated us more like ATMs than people, seeing Samuel not as her son but more as a financial resource. Every encounter with her inevitably led to some request for money. Ryan has a big family, doesn't he? You two don't have children, and both of you earn well. Maybe you could help out a bit, she would suggest, her financial demands becoming an expected part of our interactions. Ryan's household was indeed large, a blended family of 7, struggling under the weight of poor financial management. After his first wife left him, Ryan remarried Kayla and expanded his family, yet their finances were always messy. They relied heavily on external support, constantly asking us for money to get by. What's with the crowd? And why the cold treatment to your mothers? Samuel's mother would complain, pressing us to take better care of her, especially since she had been lonely after Samuel's father passed away. Her behavior had changed drastically after her husband's death. He was a strict and rational man who kept her more grounded. Without him, she seemed to lose all restraint, her demands for money becoming more frequent and bold. Previously disowned by his father, Ryan had left town with another woman, only to return after his father's death with Kayla in tow. This town supported child-rearing, but raising 5 children required significant financial strength, a reality that seemed lost on Ryan and Kayla. This month is tough again financially. Could you give us a little support? Ryan would ask, oblivious to the strain his requests put on us, especially with Samuel's mounting medical bills. Frustrated by their unreasonable demands and insensitivity, I eventually lost my patience. Please stop. Samuel is already struggling so much. What are you thinking? I pleaded, but they disregarded my concerns, Kayla even laughing off my pleas dismissively. When we shared that Samuel had about 5 months to live and was planning to be discharged to spend his final days at home, their reaction was chilling. Instead of shock or sadness, their faces lit up with an odd joy, which was incredibly upsetting to witness. Then we'll come to pick him up by car when he's discharged. He can't walk back, can he? They proposed eagerly. Unable to tolerate their behavior any longer, especially in such a sensitive moment, I took a firm stand. There's no need for that, Samuel said calmly, but overwhelmed by the situation, I asked them to leave the hospital room. Their lack of genuine concern and overt self-interest pushed me to the edge, and I could no longer bear their presence. As they clamored at the door, insisting on staying, I firmly told them, please go home. I will manage the discharge preparations myself. Your presence here is not necessary, and frankly, I don't want to see any of you again. My in-laws attempted to protest, but I swiftly cut them off, slammed the door shut, and locked it. I quickly informed the hospital staff about the situation and requested that visits be restricted to myself alone, ensuring my in-laws could not disturb Samuel. I'm sorry, Grace. I've brought you so much trouble, Samuel apologized later, his voice low. Why don't you stand up to them? They ridicule you and use you. I questioned him, my frustration growing. It seemed so unfair that such manipulative people could live comfortably while someone as genuine as Samuel suffered. It might have seemed extreme, but I was overwhelmed by the need to confront someone about the injustice. I still loved Samuel deeply and couldn't bear the thought of losing him. "I'm glad you spoke up for us, Grace," Samuel acknowledged quietly. "That's why I need to ask something important of you." He then entrusted me with a significant task that caught me off guard. He was entirely serious, his expression solemn. "Please, this is my first and last request," he implored. I promised to fulfill it without hesitation. After our conversation, Samuel handed over a specific item to me, and I returned home for the day. The next day, before my in-laws could arrive, I hurriedly helped Samuel get discharged from the hospital. Although we returned to our house, the looming threat of his family's interference haunted me. Determined to shield Samuel, I decided to slightly modify his wish. Instead of staying at our home, I arranged for us to stay at a friend's villa for a while. "It's sad to leave our home, but as long as I'm with you, anywhere is home," Samuel said with a shy smile, which made me blush. After explaining the situation at work, I took an extended leave of absence. My only wish was to be by Samuel's side until his final moments. With the support of our friends, Samuel spent his remaining days in peace, and 4 months later, he passed away quietly. At his funeral, I saw my in-laws for the first time since the hospital incident. I braced myself for their comments, but instead of showing any genuine sorrow, they merely gave me smug smiles. Those smiles sent a chill down my spine, leaving me to wonder about their true intentions. After the funeral, as I was sorting through Samuel's belongings at home, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, there stood my mother-in-law and Ryan, laden with numerous bags. "We finally found you. Heard from the neighbors you came back," my mother-in-law stated as she tried to push past me into the house. "What are those bags for?" I asked, blocking their entry. Ryan glared at me, irritation clear in his expression. "Stop blocking the way. Move aside," he demanded. But I stood firm. "I won't move. What's in those bags? And did you bring your kids too? What are you thinking?" Behind Ryan, his entire family stood, signaling they had something planned. Despite the confusing situation, I knew panicking would only benefit them. Confronting them resolutely, I held my ground. Then, with a mocking laugh, my mother-in-law dropped a bombshell. "From today, this house is ours. You have to leave," she declared. Shocked by their boldness, I was momentarily speechless. "My son's possessions naturally belong to his blood-related family, don't they? He has left this will for us," she added, waving a document. Faced with their audacity, I knew I had to stand up not just for Samuel's legacy, but for our shared past and the truth of his wishes. When my mother-in-law showed me the will, laughing triumphantly, I couldn't help but burst into laughter myself, stunned by the sheer audacity of their claim. "What's so funny?" she snapped, clearly annoyed by my reaction. Kayla, peeking from behind Ryan, glared at me with evident anger. Wiping away tears of laughter, I faced their displeased expressions and prepared to unveil a stunning truth. "Don't you know? This house is already mine," I declared. "What?" my mother-in-law gasped, echoed by a disbelieving "what" from Ryan. My statement left them completely baffled, their clueless expressions only fueling another wave of laughter from me. Regaining my composure, I excused myself to retrieve some crucial documents from another room. Returning with the papers, I announced, "As you can see, I am now officially the owner of this house." Samuel had already transferred the ownership to me while he was still alive. "What are you talking about?" my mother-in-law exclaimed, her eyes wide with shock. She hastily grabbed the documents from my hands and scrutinized them alongside Ryan. "It's true. It's been changed to her name," they murmured in disbelief. The document was official, and the ownership was indisputably mine. Despite their protests and raised voices questioning how Samuel could no longer own the house, I remained calm. "He wanted to change the ownership to me before his discharge," I explained. "He thought it would be more useful for the future if he transferred it to my name while he was still alive." Interrupting me, my mother-in-law thrust her copy of the will at me. "This can't be. Look, here is a will he wrote," she insisted. The document she showed was indeed in Samuel's handwriting but lacked any legal seals or signatures, It was merely a document and did not function as a legal will, a fact they seemed unable to grasp. Exasperated by their ignorance, I sighed deeply. Knowing that no amount of explanation would sway them, I asked them to wait a moment and called a lawyer for legal assistance. "I appreciate your help. I apologize, but his family has come over concerning the will. Could you possibly come over urgently?" "Thank you." I spoke into the phone. Ryan watched me suspiciously, wondering aloud, "Whom are you contacting?" I offered no detailed explanation, but urged them to come inside first. I seated my mother-in-law and Ryan in the living room, telling the children they could play freely in the bedroom. Soon, the house's chime rang, and I went to greet the visitor at the entrance, escorting the person I had been speaking with on the phone into the living room. "I apologize for the delay," I said as the suited man entered. Ryan and the others immediately tensed up, glaring at him with hostility. "This is Mr. Jack, the lawyer who has been helping us with Samuel's matters," I introduced him. Upon learning Jack's identity, my mother-in-law exclaimed in astonishment. I had gotten acquainted with him through a friend of the owner of the villa we were renting. Although he was young, at 28 years old, which initially made Samuel and me a bit uneasy, he was known among his peers for his quick thinking and especially strong handling of family disputes. After meeting him face-to-face, we trusted him completely. Samuel and I had explained the entire situation regarding the inheritance and family troubles to Jack and formally hired him as our lawyer. My in-laws seemed completely unaware that Samuel had taken such a step. They looked utterly astounded, as if the idea of legal proceedings had never crossed their minds. Ryan and Kayla were equally wide-eyed, clearly unprepared for the turn of events. "Allow me to reintroduce myself. I am Jack. I am here at Samuel's request, and I will be recording this conversation for legal evidence," Jack announced. Unlike Ryan, who is known for his flamboyant attire, Jack presented a stark contrast with his simple, professional look, short black hair and clean, straightforward glasses. My mother-in-law seemed momentarily distracted by Jack's authoritative demeanor. Jack, always the professional, politely offered his business card, which my mother-in-law and the others accepted reflexively, their posture stiffening as they recognized his legitimacy as a lawyer. We settled onto the sofa, with Jack and I on one side facing my in-laws. Jack expertly set up the voice recorder as the formal discussion commenced. "May I take a look at the will you have brought?" Jack asked in a composed tone. The slight tremble in my mother-in-law's hand as she passed over the document revealed her anxiety about securing the inheritance without solid legal backing. Jack reviewed the will carefully. After a moment, he handed it back to her with a polite smile, which seemed to heighten her nervousness. "Was that Samuel's will?" she asked eagerly. "Yes, indeed. It appears to be Samuel's handwriting," Jack confirmed. She quickly interjected, confident now, "See, with this, the house becomes ours." However, Jack calmly clarified, "That will is an older version, though." "What do you mean?" my mother-in-law exclaimed, taken aback. "It seems you did not catch that the will you presented is indeed Samuel's, but it dates from an earlier time. The will that is officially recognized as valid is this more recent one," Jack explained, producing a newer will from his bag. "This document is more recent, and it reads, 'I leave all my assets to Grace. The previous will I wrote for my mother is hereby revoked, and this document shall stand as my official will.'" Kayla snatched the newer will from Jack to inspect it herself, her face falling as she noted the recent date, the seal, and even Samuel's fingerprint impression, which confirmed its authenticity and official status. Ryan and Kayla's complexions turned ashen as they realized the implications. My mother-in-law could only quiver, her lips trembling in shock. Ryan, overwhelmed by frustration and betrayal, confronted his mother fiercely. "You said all the inheritance would be ours." His tone was so vehement it bordered on threatening, causing Kayla to intervene. Despite her efforts, Ryan's anger was palpable, and his verbal barrage continued unabated. As the situation escalated, I fixed Ryan with a stern glare and spoke calmly, "Please stop causing a disturbance in someone else's home. It's troublesome." "What did you say?" Ryan retorted sharply. "If you cause any more trouble here, Jack will confirm everything, and if necessary, we will consider taking legal action. The mention of legal consequences and Jack's preparedness to enforce them seemed to bring Ryan back to a sense of reality. The chaotic scene underscored the importance of having legal protection, and it was clear that Jack's presence was pivotal in handling the situation. Facing a lawyer like Jack, Ryan, who lacked legal knowledge, found his resistance futile. He nervously settled back onto the sofa. The room had fallen silent when I decided to press further, asking my mother-in-law, did Samuel truly write this will himself during his hospital stay? Yes, he did. Samuel wrote it for me while he was in the hospital, she responded, irritation creeping into her voice. Really? Was Samuel happy to write it? I probed deeper, causing her frustration to become more apparent. This line of questioning felt like an interrogation, and it was clear she was uncomfortable. Enough already. That's what I've been telling you. Kayla snapped defensively, supporting my mother-in-law who nodded in agreement. Catching Jack's eye, I gave him a discreet nod. He adjusted his glasses and nodded back affirmatively, signaling it was time to reveal a critical piece of information to my in-laws. That's an interesting story, but it seems a bit off, I began. Actually, hospital surveillance cameras recorded you forcing Samuel to write the will. As I spoke, I pulled out my laptop and inserted a USB drive provided by the hospital into the computer. Samuel had confided in Jack that he felt coerced into writing the will. We informed the hospital, which cooperated by providing the surveillance footage. I quickly loaded the video and played it on the screen. The footage was damning, capturing my mother-in-law in a threatening tone. We'd be in trouble if you died, and the inheritance didn't come through, as she pressured Samuel to write the will. Ryan and Kayla were also visible in the video, complicit in the coercion. If you don't want anything bad to happen to your wife, just write the will quietly, they could be heard urging Samuel. Hey Samuel, just sign this, and nothing will happen to her, so don't worry. This video was taken 5 days before Samuel was discharged from the hospital. As their scheme unraveled before their eyes, my in-laws scrambled for excuses. No, it's not like that. It was just a joke that went too far, Kayla pleaded. I saw a drama before going to the hospital where the villain looked so cool. I just imitated it without thinking. I didn't mean it seriously, please forgive us. Their flimsy excuses only deepened my frustration, and I sighed at their pitiful display. If you had admitted it honestly, it might have been one thing, but trying to hide it clearly shows your intent, I remarked. Jack, can we apply charges of extortion based on this? I asked. Absolutely, Jack replied with a broad smile, picking up the voice recorder. The statements provide sufficient evidence. Ryan and Kayla, realizing they had forgotten about the voice recorder, showed their astonishment. That means, including compensation for the victim, we will be filing for damages against all of you. This can't be true. Wait a minute, Grace. Kayla protested. It was only Mom who made him sign. We were just watching. We didn't force him to sign anything. This accusation sparked a heated argument among them. It was you two who offered to help get the will written, wasn't it? My mother-in-law retorted. You said you would handle it properly, Mom. We were just watching. You were the ones rushing Samuel to write it quickly, Ryan added defensively. That was because Samuel's medical appointment was approaching. It wasn't about rushing the will. There just wasn't much time, and we thought it should be done before Grace arrived. Their panicked justifications made it clear they might have been advancing their plan without any concern for Samuel's well-being, revealing the depth of their deception and selfishness. As the heated argument continued, Kayla inadvertently revealed more damaging details. Unaware of the implications of her words, she argued fervently. The noise was so overwhelming it almost made me cover my ears. Meanwhile, the children, who had been playing quietly behind the scenes, began to gather around us, drawn by the commotion. Among them was a child as young as 3 years old, their anxious eyes wide and worried. Understanding that the children were innocent bystanders in this chaos, I called over my eldest nephew, a 5th grader, and quickly ushered all the children into another room to shield them from the unsightly brawl. He seemed confused, but obediently led his younger siblings away. Once the children were out of sight, I turned back to the 3 squabbling adults. Isn't this shameful? What kind of example are you setting as parents? I admonished them sharply. denying your responsibilities and blaming each other in front of the children. Don't you see how pathetic this is? You're just trying to escape responsibility. Kayla, suddenly remembering the children who had just left, paused and showed a flicker of remorse. I truly am sorry. I acknowledge everything, not just the threats. Please forgive us, she pleaded. Ryan and his mother quickly echoed her, also seeking forgiveness. We need to support our children, so please help us with the financial part. I don't know how we'll manage if we are charged with damages. We're done for. Please overlook this. If there is a sin, I will atone for it, they begged, tears in their eyes. However, their pleas only fueled my anger further. In the end, all you think about is yourselves and money. I can't sense any real remorse from you. That's not the intent. It's just that we're financially strained, and we wanted you to understand our situation. They tried to explain, but it sounded like mere excuses. Caught off guard by my confrontation, Ryan fell silent, his mother and Kayla feeling the pressure too. I didn't give them a chance to continue their apologies and cut them off. I have no intention of forgiving you. If you truly care about your children, you should be working harder to repay your debts. Isn't everything that happened a result of your actions towards Samuel? It's all your fault. Why should I forgive you? It's unreasonable. They were left speechless, with no room to argue. If you understand, then please leave. This house is important to me, and I have no intention of living with you. Grace, please forgive us. We were wrong. Grace, please help us. They continued to beg, but I remained resolute. If you say another word, I'll call the police. Finally, fearing the legal repercussions, they showed signs of panic. They quickly gathered their children and belongings and left the house. Jack and I watched their departure with a stern gaze, and we immediately locked the door after they left, sighing in relief that the matter was finally settling. Afterward, I asked Jack to promptly initiate the process for claiming damages. He had already prepared everything, and the claims process proceeded smoothly. The three were charged $55,000 in damages for coercing Samuel into signing the will. Unable to pay the large sum, they proposed a settlement, but I made no concessions. I will insist on full payment, I affirmed, determined to see justice done. Refusing to negotiate altered their lives drastically. My mother-in-law found herself caring for 5 children single-handedly from dawn until dusk, while Ryan and Kayla were thrust into a relentless cycle of labor. They were compelled to sell their house and relocate to a small apartment, squeezing all 7 of them into the confined space as they struggled to pay off the damages. There was no immediate hope for an improvement in their circumstances, and it seemed they were destined to endure these harsh conditions until the youngest child reached adulthood. As for me, cutting ties with them allowed me to move on. I continued living in the same house where Samuel and I had shared our lives, maintaining my routine and working as usual. Friends from work would drop by from time to time, ensuring I seldom felt lonely. Each day, I would stand before Samuel's portrait, keeping him updated on daily happenings. This became my cherished ritual. On one of his last days, Samuel had expressed a final wish. He asked that I speak to him every day, saying, "I love your voice and our conversations more than anything. So, I hope you will keep talking to me every day so that your voice can reach me even in heaven." After he passed, I solemnly vowed to uphold this promise, ensuring our connection would endure. Every day, without fail, I talked to him, recounting the mundane details of my life, the challenges and the joys, as if he were still beside me. This ongoing dialogue is not just a commitment, but a lifeline that keeps our bond alive. Regardless of what the future holds, even if illness should confine me, my daily conversations with Samuel will persist. This lasting promise to continue our dialogue until the day I depart to join him is my way of keeping our love and memory alive.